Hello people, this is Sonali, the Melodramatic Bookworm. If you've been here before, welcome back, and if you're new to my channel, welcome to the Melodramatic Bookworm family. Also welcome to this very ambitious project that I've had to keep silent for more than a month now because I was scared that I would jinx it. But in today's video, I will be taking you through my thoughts about the 6 books that were shortlisted for the International Booker Prize 2024 and also try to predict the winner before the official announcement on the 21st of May. Why am I doing this, you ask? I mean, why do I do anything these days? For the love of it, for the satisfaction that comes with being right, I guess. But that's assuming that I am right, which we don't know. Anyway, for those of you who are like me from a couple of months ago and don't know much about the Booker Prizes, here's a little description. So basically, there are 2 Booker Prizes, okay? One is the Booker Prize, which was also previously known as the Man Booker Prize, that is awarded every year to the best English language fiction that is published in the UK and or Ireland. The winner gets a £50,000 prize and also more visibility and ergo more sales. There's a bit of history to who was and wasn't allowed to participate in this, but like everything, I think becoming a better version of itself was its only option if you ask me. Then comes the International Booker Prize, also hosted in the UK, the shortlist for which I will be discussing in this video. And this is awarded to the best fiction translated into English that is published in the UK and or Ireland. Again, the winner gets a £50,000 prize, but this time it is split between the author and the translator. And previous winners of the International Booker Prize include Han Kang and translator Deborah Smith for The Vegetarian, Olga Tokarzuk and translator Jennifer Croft for Flights, and our very own Geetanjali Shri and translator Daisy Rockwell for Tomb of Sand or Red Samadhi. This year the winner will be announced on May 21st at an event in London, so I'm trying to get this video in time. I have been scrambling, but here we are. Okay, so now that my little freakout session is done, back to the International Booker Prize. The judging panel changes every year, but what is consistent is that there are 5 judges that are chosen from different parts of the literary world who obviously set out to do a very challenging job. I mean, I am winded having to read 6 books. Imagine having to read over 150 books, some twice or thrice in a span of a few months. I mean, it's not an enviable job, but I also don't think that this is the best way to decide what the best book of the year or the best book in general is. But hey, we'll work with what we've got, which is ironically what is occurred in a couple of the books from the 2024 shortlist. So is that a sign or something? Now moving on to the 2024 shortlist. As always, there were 6 books that were shortlisted, each with a different crux, each trying to address or even just narrate a reality that is rampant in today's world, be it one or a combination of class systems, racism, oppression, violence, human connections, mental health, natural disasters, and so much more. While I was able to read 5 of these 6 books, there was one that ended up being a DNF, just 6% in. I'll tell you all about it in today's video, where I'll be comparing them and I'll be trying to come up with the name of the book that is most likely to win the International Booker Prize 2024. But first, the shortlist. The 6 books on the shortlist for the International Booker Prize 2024 are Crooked Plow by Itamar Vieira Jr., translated from the Portuguese by Johnny Lorenz. The Details by Ia Genberg, translated from the Swedish by Kira Josefsson. Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck, translated from the German by Michael Hoffman. Meta 210 by Hwang Sok-yong, translated from the Korean by Sora Kim Russell and Yoonjae Josephine Bae. Not a River by Selva Almada, translated from the Spanish by Annie McDermott. And What I'd Rather Not Think About by Gente Postuma. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And translated from the Dutch into English by Sarah Timmer Harvey. Before I go on to my little comparison, let me tell you what these books are all about and what I thought about them. First up is Crooked Plow by Itamar Vieira Jr. and translated from the Portuguese into English by Johnny Lorenz. This was also the first book that I had read from this shortlist, and I surprisingly loved it despite the heaviness of its features and the tedium of reading. This is a story set in Brazil's hinterland, the Bahia region, where a huge settlement of the Quilombola people, who are people who escaped slavery and their descendants exists. We are now following the lives of these descendants when they are now living in bonded labor. The story starts off as one about two sisters who find a knife in their grandmother's much beloved suitcase. Curious, they taste the metal only for one of them to end up losing their tongue and the other to get away with just a scar. They were close before, but this accident makes sure that they become heavily codependent on each other, understanding each other through just looks and gestures. At this point, I thought this was going to be the story. But you know how naive as readers can get, right? Because from here on out, the story just unfurls like a time lapse of A Flower in Bloom. Only occasionally it is ripped through by the titular crooked plow. We take a step back and zoom out to progressively see the bigger picture as we go from looking at the sisters' lives to the family's life, to the Bahian community as a whole, to the larger class system as we get an idea about the treatment of the working class by the landowners, to the whole idea of what it means to be a nation. I love the story because it is poignant, it is compelling, it is magical in places, but no element overpowers the other too much. Some, I agree that they do open up only towards the end, but that only enhances the story somehow. However, you cannot ignore the fact that it is a slow, tedious read. You have to have a lot of patience with the story because even though the translation is good, it's very good, it's the story itself that feels like you're lifting boulders at times. And then the fact that sometimes we hardly know what's going on. Clarity is hard to come by and the language itself feels so disconnected from the characters. But those are just a few pockets. But otherwise you have a great story, a cast of characters who are layered and unpredictable and so human. The experience of bonded laborers, which is a story that we see in so many parts of the world. A peek into a culture that is so different from your own and that has so much more of an earthly awareness. And parts of the world that we might never see in our lifetimes if not for the works of authors like Itamar Vieira Jr. who works in land reform. And at the end of the book, I was glad that I picked this book to kick off my International Booker Prize journey with. Next was The Details by Ia Genberg and translated from the Swedish into English by Kira Josefsson. And I finished this book in one sitting and it quickly became my favorite of the lot without any doubt, without competition. And it is one of my very few 5-star reads of the year and I don't know how to react to it except by maybe falling to my knees or something. It's so good. So the table of contents tells us 4 names and if you're anything like me, you'll have guessed that we are going to read a story from the perspectives of these 4 characters. Like a multiple POV kind of thing. Well, it's true, but it's also not true. But what you're about to read is going to be so much more than that. We follow Johanna, a famous television and radio host, Nikki, the mercurial friend who disappears, Alejandro, a musician who doesn't have a lot of clarity but does have a lot of confidence, and Bridget, a woman living in pain. There is one thread connecting all of these people and I must say that this is one of the most well-written books I've read this year and my throat's going to close up if I keep talking about it, but I'm going to try. It is a narrative about humans, about people as individuals, about how every person is so different from the next, about how everyone deals with things in their own ways, the leaving of everyone, the reality of everyone, the love, trust and confidence that people have in other people, the willingness to trust, and this book will have you wondering about humanity to within an inch of its life. It is about subverting beliefs. It is about learning about the people in your life. It is about coming to terms with circumstances. It is about noticing the details so that you can make your decisions. It is about seeing people and learning their nuances. I am a little biased towards the writing in this book, that much I can tell at this point, but aren't we all biased to one book or the other though? Okay, moving on. Next was Kairos by Jenny Uppenbeck and translated from the German into English by Michael Hoffman. And this was a DNF. I did not finish reading this book and to be honest, it was way too soon after I started reading it that I realized that this book wasn't going to work for me. Just 6% into it and I was immediately put off by the writing and by a 19-year-old girl and a 53-year-old man having an affair. Okay, let us put that last part aside and talk about the writing. The writing is covered in so much flowery prose, which feels like it wants to be intelligent and edgy, but it only turns out to be irritating. And if it were a case of mild irritation, I would have given it a go, but oh my god, this is a 95 on a pretension scale of 1 to 100. And I knew that if I continued reading it, I would end up hating the book, so I noped out of there real quick. Next is Meter 210 by Hwang So-kyung and translated from the Korean into the English by Sora Kim Russell and Youngjae Josephine Bae. This is such a tome, and one that I finished just in time for this video to go up, but it is a well-written tome which is packed with historical and political detail, and I'm really glad to have read it, even though it took all of my energy and all of my concentration to do so. Meter 210 is a multi-generational saga about Japanese imperialism and the Korean fight for liberation from oppression, and this is a book that is so rich in detail that it sometimes feels like it's being overpowered by its own scrupulousness. This is one book that demands patience, and when you are generous towards it by giving it your all, it will ultimately reward you by giving you an experience so vast and so profound and a knowledge so deep that you will end up feeling lucky to have read it. Meter 210 starts off with Yi Jino, who is now in a sit-in at the top of a chimney because his company has laid off multiple workers, including him. And this form of protest, which is common in South Korea, is an attempt to get the companies to roll back these policies which are affecting so many common people. Now, Jino spends months atop that chimney trying to form a routine for himself and is visited by the ghosts of the people from his life. And through these, we are taken through the events of his life from before he ascended that chimney. We are also taken through the lives of his great-grandparents, his grandparents, and his parents against the backdrop of colonial life under Japanese oppression. Off the top of my head, the themes in this book include the struggles of the common man under these circumstances of oppression and violence, home life when things get bad outside, varying opinions in the same household, what it means to share blood, fighting for the right thing, making connections while being cautious, communist resistance against the Japanese oppression, and how it simmered under the forceful, brutal repression. And above all of it, the hierarchy that exists in the working class system and how rights scale up accordingly. Meter 210 is not just a description, it is encyclopedic in the way it provides the knowledge that you need to understand the story, including the geographical details to have a better idea about the terrain across which the story is playing out. It is historical fiction, sure, but for large chunks of it, it will make you feel like you are reading a non-fiction history, and the way that the author dispenses with these details is tedious yet engaging, and it can feel like it should be only one of the two, but it is both. Meter 210 will take all of your energy and concentration and will leave you exhausted by the end of it. I mean, I guess a century of history compressed into 600 pages of historical fiction will do that to you. And that is the case with Meter 210, which has scores of historical, political and civic details about the Japanese oppression of Korea. These are details that make the story so academic sounding and dense that it requires you to be present in yourself when you read it. Because if you look away for even one moment, it will meander away enough for you to scramble to understand what is happening. And this happened to me multiple times through the story. But that, I think, in this book is a huge plus because it keeps you invested, it keeps you attached to the story. No matter if you forget the history in about 10 minutes, you'll always have that base to fall back upon. Next was Not a River by Selva Almada and translated from the Spanish into English by Annie McDermott. And this is another of the shortlist that is short and rife with feeling. Not a River is the story of an Argentinian island, its locals, and 4 men who arrive on the banks to fish in the river. And this is a very simplistic explanation of a layered story about righteous anger and respect towards nature. So Enero, El Negro and Eusebio have had a tradition of coming to fish in the Parana River. But since Eusebio died by drowning in the same river, this time Enero and El Negro have brought Tilo, who is Eusebio's son, along with them. Now, while fishing, they manage to capture a huge stingray, and it takes hours for them to keep it in place enough to kill it, which Enero does by shooting at it. And after that, they hang it from a tree where now that it is exposed to the elements, the corpse is exposed to the elements, it starts rotting. Some locals arrive and on seeing the stingray and the casual way in which these outsiders are treating it are instantly furious. I mean, they don't show it then, but you can feel it underlining the story throughout the book. And what helps you understand the islanders' anger is when one of these men, he sees the stingray rotting and he pulls it from the tree and tosses it back into the river. And this story, it moves back and forth between timelines and places. Like in one scene we are following Enero, El Negro and Tilo, and in the next you are thrown back in time, and almost immediately you feel Eusebio replaces Tilo. And then we are shifted parallelly during the same time period, or it could be a different one, but we now follow two sisters who are the nieces of one of the infuriated locals who come in contact with the men who have come fishing at a local bar and invite them to a dance. And then there is the fury itself that simmers in the minds and hearts of the locals and about how it manifests itself. There is a case to be made for a book written as vaguely as this one, that as you read the story, it gives you everything you need along with the instructions, and all it does is expect you to slide these puzzle pieces into the right slots. And when you do, you'll realize that as against what could sometimes feel as choppy waters, the bigger picture is actually a fantastic representation of a flowing river. There will be waves, but none strong enough to derail the story, and they come together to form a storyscape so vivid and intense that I was left stunned at the end. In a nutshell, Not a River is the story of a river and of human violence, both of arrogant masculinity as well as of assumed righteousness. The story slows at speed checks, but it also flows. To pack so much into such a short book takes a special kind of talent, and I'm so glad to have been introduced to the powerhouse that is Selva Almada. While Not a River felt like a jigsaw puzzle that I rather enjoyed putting together, this next book, the last book on this list, which is What I'd Rather Not Think About, felt like a jigsaw puzzle of the other kind. The kind where everything is thrown together higgledy-piggledy and the reader is expected to do all the work, structural work included. And that honestly turned it into a book that I'd rather not think about. This is the story of twins, one of whom has died by suicide, and the surviving twin, the sister, across more than 120 short chapters, looks back on their life together and wonders when it was that she actually lost her depressive brother. What I'd Rather Not Think About felt like the movie The Tall Girl to me, only in this book there are generous additions of and mentions of loss, grief, longing for family and angst. Not to forget the bunch of Holocaust references that were made that feel like they were inserted just to make the plot sound more intense. I mean, I know that they were fraternal twins, but should mentions of the experiments on twins in the concentration camps be made as an analogy? What I must focus on, but which gets lost in this brand of storytelling, is the fact that the author chooses to tell of the people who are grieving. What happens to the people who are left behind, what goes through their minds, and what they'd rather not think about is the crux of this story. But then again, it is overshadowed by the sister's temper, her choices, her repeatedly going over subjects, and despite it being a story about her trying to understand her brother from beyond, it just turns into one of self-pity. I mean, self-pity isn't bad. She is entitled to telling her own story, her own thoughts, as anybody else is. But the writing style with which this is done, it made the book, the story, pretty much unbearable. At least it did for me. So while this wasn't the last book that I read of these 6, I do believe that this is last but one on my ranking of the International Booker Prize Shortlist 2024, just above Kairos, which obviously, as I mentioned before, was a DNF. Now, moving on to comparing these books and trying to come up with the potential winner of the International Booker Prize 2024 through a process of elimination. Of the 6 books, there is one that I think will definitely not figure in the top 3, which is What I'd Rather Not Think About. It seems like a pretty surface level exploration of a sibling relationship, and it doesn't have much depth to it, so I definitely think that it will not make it, which is why I'm kicking it off the list right off the bat. Of the remaining 5, it is extremely difficult to know which book might win, and I know which one I want to win because of its crisp narrative. But let's go by my reader's logic and let's go by what I thought of these books. I'm next going to eliminate Kairos, not because I DNF'd it, but because it is too reliant and too heavy on the almost pedophilic storyline. It is way too dependent on a highly complicated prose charading as a poetic narrative, so I think that is going to be its downfall. So that is out. But I do know that Kairos is a crowd favorite and that it might have a higher standing in Booker circles than it did with me, and yet the next 4 books are books that, even though I have a favorite of the lot and I'm rooting for it, I will be happy if any of these wins. With a heavy heart, I'm going to have to bump off Not a River. I mean, I love this book, okay, but I do think that the vagueness, which was something that actually worked for me, will be the very thing that might not get these authors their international Booker. I'm hoping on some level that the vagueness does work, and I'll be very happy if the book ends up winning, but at this point I don't think it will be moving forward. Of the last 3, I think Crooked Plow should be the next to go. I mean, it's a great book, but it does meander in places, and the tedium of the plot in arriving at the next level might be the thing that stops it from winning. The ultimate battle for me, however, is between Meta 210 and The Details, which happens to be my favorite of the lot. These 2 books are so different from each other that at one point I was like, there should be different categories for both of these books and both of them should win. But that's not how it works, so moving on. While Meta 210 is a 600-page tome with a century of Korean history in it, The Details is a short book about humans and human connections. While Meta 210 is packed with historical, political and civic details about the Japanese oppression of Korea, The Details is packed with little details about how each human is different from the next. While Meta 210 is a multi-generational saga of differing opinions between people of the same blood affected by the same external circumstances, The Details is a multi-people saga of different opinions between people of different blood coming together due to various external circumstances. While Meta 210 is a dense story that needs you to be grounded and in the moment, The Details takes you out of your body and out of the moment and thrusts you into a space where only your thoughts exist. And while Meta 210 is flush with descriptions and historical narrations, The Details is crisp, to the point, emotional, matter of fact, elevates and honors human differences and folds around you like a warm hug. And that, my friends, is why I think The Details will win the International Booker Prize this year. So there's my prediction. Let me tell you, at the end of this project, I feel so accomplished, I can't even tell you. I mean, it's not pride, it's exhaustion because of the kind of books that they are and that they demand so much of me that I'm like, I have done this. And I'm so glad that I read these books because I ended up finding a couple of favorites from among them. Does this mean that I will do this again next year or for this year's Booker Prizes when the shortlist will be announced this September? I don't know. I don't know what state of mind I will be in at that time. I don't want to commit to something that I might not do, which is why I kept this under wraps as well. But let's see, if the titles are interesting enough, why not? So that was my winner prediction for the International Booker Prize 2024. The winner announcement, the event will be held in London on the 21st of May, and I cannot wait to find out that The Details has won. So what did you think of this video? Did you like it? Have you read any of these books? If you have, what did you think of them? Do you have any favorite? If you haven't, will you be picking these books up after watching this video? And what book are you rooting for? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you like this video, please like it and share it to spread the word. And if you like my content and would like to see more from me, don't forget to hit subscribe and click on the bell icon beside the subscribe button to get notified as and when I post new videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and add melodrama to your life.